If you've never played a rogue-style game, the basic concept is that when you die, you start from the absolute beginning of the game and lose everything, or at least that is how the early games like Rogue and NetHack were from back in the day. More modern rogue-style games offer some form of persistent progression, like points to apply to base stats or ability unlocks. Either way, you start over from scratch every time you die and have to fight through the same early levels over and over. You won't be able to practice later boss fights without having to constantly go through the early ones. There are no saves to reload from or waypoints to skip past anything, and each run will take longer as you get farther and farther. Personally, I get suckered into a lot of these. They look really cool and I'll play them for a while, but usually get tired of starting over and over, so never actually complete them. Some good examples of modern rogue-style games would be Hades from the ARPG genre, the platformer Dead Cells, or FPS-style games like Project Warlock, Gunfire Reborn, or Witchfire. Also see just about any Vampire Survivors clone. Which brings us to Abyssus. This is an FPS roguelike developed by Double Moose Games and published by the Arcade Crew. It released on August 12, 2025, priced at $24.99, and there is no demo. When I first saw this in my Steam recommendations, I thought it looked pretty cool and it reminded me a bit of BioShock. Then I saw the roguelike tag and kind of generic looking assets and paused a bit. This game found its way on and off my Steam wishlist a couple of times before I actually pulled the trigger on it.
What do we have here?
My first time playing impressions were that the graphics were really good looking and movement fluid. Areas are absolutely gorgeous to look at. It's like a fantasy background that you can daydream on whatever monsters live within. However, stuff like the lore dialogues feel a little like a store-bought asset. Maybe it's the font or the wooden style, but they feel cheap compared to the rest of the game's presentation. Audio is on point, the music is subtle, you definitely notice it ramps up and down whether you're in combat or not, but it isn't ever headache-inducing or needs to be turned down. Gunfire is satisfying, as are enemy noises and environmental sounds, like there's a nice low rumble when you descend into a depth for a run. Overall, I thought this had a really good presentation.
You're in the way.
The first half hour or so, I felt like the game was a bit repetitive. You go through the same areas over and over, fighting the same monsters. However, once I started getting new weapons, weapon mods, and abilities, the game really clicked. Monster variety does expand a bit as you get farther, but not too much. You'll start off fighting eyeballs that fire a projectile and maybe get some gorillas with an AoE slam. Flying creatures, spinning top-looking things, and bigger brute types will get added into the mix the further you go. And getting used to the game at first was, let's say, a little different. Your character is really weak as you'd expect, but the controls have some nuance to them. On the control side, it's your standard WASD move and mouse to shoot. A difference is left click is the primary fire of the gun, with the right click being secondary, and there is a massive distinction which we'll talk about in the gun section. The ability and melee keys were the worst to get my head around from years of what I'd call regular FPS control setups. Grenade is on Q and melee on F. Now in an FPS game I rarely use melee, so that wasn't too big a deal, but grenade is forever on G in my head. However, once you unlock the turret or anchor ability, it makes more sense. That isn't really a grenade key, it's the ability key, and as mentioned, once you unlock more abilities, it makes sense that the key is moved away from melee and placed where it is. You can fully rebind them if you want, but I decided early on to not do that and to just try to get my head wrapped around the game the way it is. There is a logbook found by hitting the escape key, which details what you need to do to unlock the various guns, their mods, abilities, charms, and cosmetics. There is a dash on spacebar, and holding tab shows you the currently equipped charms, guns, mods, and blessings, which rounds out the controls.
Empty shadow.
That brings us over to progression and how to address the weakness you start with, which will cover the guns, mods, abilities, charms, and soul wheel as we go. I'll add that there are some really good guides on Steam detailing where and how to obtain the unlocks, which you'll likely need. Gun mods you'll usually get after doing something like killing so many enemies in a certain way or something like that, but unlocking the guns and abilities require you not only to do a certain task, but know to pick the item up from a certain place. An example is the shotgun, which unlocks after you beat the first mini-boss you come across. However, you don't actually get the gun until you go to a side room and pick it up. So if you find the room and somehow don't pick it up like I did, you'll be stuck with the crappy machine gun for far longer than necessary. And you may be wondering how you can miss a pickup. Simple answer is that there are lore books right next to items, and if you miss to click on the item, you'll get the lore book instead, thinking that the item on the table is for show and merely has a lore piece, or so that's what I thought of until I hit up a guide. Charms are items you'll get from boss drops, maybe a chest or a vendor if you run across one of those. These will give you things like more damage or health and may have some condition like when at full life. You cannot change these in the hub area and can only swap one for another when you find a new one from a boss drop or a vendor. So you'll pretty much take the first one you find and swap out to whatever is better. Blessings are a bit more difficult. There will occasionally be a green altar that offers you a choice between two. There are aspects of blood, defense, fire, fortune, frost, lightning, night, ocean, spirit, and wind. Blood deals damage based on your life, defense builds up a barrier, fire, frost, lightning, night, ocean, spirit, and wind are more offensive oriented, with fortune being a boost to gold generation. You'll get effects like catching enemies on fire, freezing them, chain lightning, tentacles that spawn in and bash enemies with ocean, and my personal favorite, night, which causes enemies to take more damage. Blessings are tied to your primary fire, secondary fire, or ability, so having aspect of fire tied to your turret in a boss fight means the boss is lit up pretty often. My favorite is having night attached to the secondary shotgun with the unload mod. That combo crushes bosses.
Think you can take me?
Once you select between the two blessing options, you'll have to select a specific type, which is where you get primary, secondary, or ability options. Subsequent choices offer further customization, but these are random, so you won't always get Knight on secondary with a 100% chance to apply, unfortunately. And that brings us to the Soul Wheel. This thing took me far too long to get to because once I beat the first boss, I moved on without realizing that there were soul fragments to scoop up and spin on the wheel. I ended up killing that boss quite a few times and missed out on those drops each time. It took beating the second boss to realize that these drops existed, so who knows how much progression I lost there. Anyway, once you get the soul fragments and start applying them to the wheel, you'll get more damage, life, uses of the abilities, and so much more. You also get more soul fragments on harder bosses. All of that adds up to make your runs better each time. There is RNG with charm drops in which blessings are available, but you can usually put something pretty devastating together once you understand how it all fits together. So let's switch over to talking about the guns, which there are 8 of. You'll start off with the machine gun. It's got a pretty standard fire rate on left-click primary fire that runs out of ammo and reloads. Left-click secondary gets you a faster rate of fire, which builds up heat to a cooldown, but doesn't need reloading. Primary mods include the standard full auto, a burst fire, and a Gatling fire that speeds up the longer you hold the trigger. Gatling mode starts slower than normal, so it kind of sucks and you have to complete a run with the rifle to get the burst fire, which I've not done yet. Secondary mods include the engine rev with a high rate of fire, the split shot which shoots multiple shots in random pattern, and the concentrated shot which actually knocks enemies back. All 3 of these generate heat, but as mentioned earlier, do not require a reload, just a cooldown. So you can swap between right-click heat buildup and left-click ammo countdown to maximize lead to target, and it's kind of interesting since you don't have to swap the weapon to do it. For this gun, automatic fire and split shot felt pretty good to me. The revolver was the second gun I found, which offers semi-auto, burst fire, and large caliber for primary, and steady, quick, or charge scopes for secondary. Didn't really spend all that much time with this one once I got the shotty though. Shotgun has semi-auto, full auto, and super heavy slug on primary fire, with buckshot, unload, and pressure shot for secondary. The combo I like here is fully automatic with unload on secondary, which unload does just that. It fires round after round until you have to reload. So once you hit the trigger, you ride it out, pointing it at baddies until it empties. You'll get some additional ammo from the fully automatic primary mod for unload to chew through, doubling your round count from 6 to 12. Get the right blessings on secondary, and this thing will melt bosses. Newest gun I have is the Tesla gun, which came from Act 2, I think. Barely used it, have no unlocks for it yet. For primary mods, it has a continuous stream, a charge beam, and a lock-on. Secondaries are all charge-based with Spark Orb, Charge Orb, and Magnetic Storm. Guns I have yet to unlock are the Disc Thrower, Combat Bow, Plasma Launcher, and Fish Deity. Looks like those come from later in Act 3 and beyond, which I've not reached yet. Abilities are the frag grenade you start with. I think the second thing I got was the turret, which I really liked. After that came the Anchor, which has a pretty decent sized AoE, and finally the Ancient Core that does big single target damage. I haven't found the Brine Field yet, so can't comment about that one, but the abilities are all pretty cool so far. We've talked about progression and all the goodies you'll get to play with, so now it's time to swap over to what you'll use those goodies on. Each run starts out in a lobby that leads to an arena. You'll go through this pattern a few times from non-combat lobby to arena with trash mobs, eventually running up against a boss. The first one is pretty easy but spongy with the rifle. Second boss had me stuck for a while. He's got quite a few moves and phases to learn and is again pretty spongy when you first get there. Continuing on, I found what I thought was the final boss. Turns out he was just the final boss of that biome with 2 more past that and a final boss to the whole game. The 3 areas I've played so far start with the Abandoned Temple, move to the Gardens, through Sanctuary, and end at some sort of all-out boss bash to end the expedition. I'm not clear if that is an actual level or just a boss fight since I haven't gotten there yet. I've been into Sanctuary, which players are calling Act 3 if you look at the guides. They use Act 1, 2, 3, and 4 with a certain depth to call out where you'll need to look for whatever gun or secret. Trash mobs in each biome get harder and have more varied mechanics to avoid. Boss fights are pretty good overall. Some of the mechanics will get reused, but with a twist, so it's not the same generic boss fight over and over. I do like the bosses I've come up against so far. They are stretched out enough to not be one after the other, and there isn't so many that they kind of blend together either. Feels like there is just enough of them, and you don't have to clear all that many trash mob rooms to get there. Something I nearly forgot about are the variety in trash mob rooms. Some are simple kill anything that moves, some have pylons to charge up, some have destroying crystals to continue. You won't get the same order each time, sometimes you'll only get kill 'em all rooms. You'll also get challenges to clear the depth in a certain amount of time or not taking damage for an extra reward. Rooms are procedurally generated, so there are times that you'll see the same hub room repeated with the same lore book, but there's enough variety that runs don't feel stale. Getting face-melting builds put together and annihilating everything in your path also helps too. If all that isn't enough, once you've cleared the expedition, you can make the game harder using the deep water tank next to where you deploy. Completing expeditions gives you brine canisters to spend on this thing, but I've not made it that far yet and can only go by what's on the machine itself. Rounding this out, I'll say that the lobby has some features to check out and secrets to find. There is a gun range if you're into that, there's an artifact room that fills up with lore items like a museum, and it pays to revisit rooms every so often. There may just be a gun or ability you didn't have before that just unlocked. Is Abyssus worth it? I see Steam reviews with 40 or 50 hours, and I've got right at 10 myself, so I'd say yes. This is a very cool game. I haven't even mentioned the co-op yet, which lets up to 4 players push through. They also put out a roadmap with free goodies coming to the game in the upcoming months. And I'll leave this video off by saying that I didn't even realize this ran on Unreal Engine 5. It looks amazing for sure, but doesn't have any of the shader caching issues like so many other games, and I haven't had any kind of stuttering that so many other Unreal Engine 5 games that I've played has. So that is going to do it for this video. We will catch you on the next one. Take care.